President Tinubu reassures Nigerians in the diaspora of a country they would be proud of to return.
We have the resources. We have still deposit and the Quran that can satisfy our needs and leave excess for export.
Minister of Solid Minerals secures free study for mining professionals in Australia.
If we are going to shift focus into this seemingly new area for us, then we need all the capacity building.
House of Representatives vow to expose and bring to justice the perpetrators of crude oil theft in the country.
Nigeria has continually failed to meet its daily production quota as set by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC.
And Good Morning Nigeria today focuses on Indo-Nigeria relations.
All right, you've heard it, Indo-Nigeria relations, and both countries have enjoyed very warm, friendly, and indeed deep-rooted bilateral relations. Now, let's start with India, with a population of 1.3 billion and counting, and Nigeria, of course, more than 200 million people, are large, developing, and very democratic countries with multi-religious, multi-ethnic, and multilingual societies. And indeed, again, India is, of course, regarded as the largest democracy in the world, whereas Nigeria is the largest in Africa.
No question about that. Now, but what do Nigeria and India have more in common, in addition to the ones that you have already highlighted? Now, the answer, of course, will not be far-fetched from being natural partners who have built strategic and commercial ties over the years. Now, both countries are members of the Commonwealth of Nations and non-aligned movement that was very, of course, active years ago.
Indeed, Kingsley. Now, another common thing you may need to know about the two nations is that for India, there is a High Commission here in Abuja and also a consulate in Lagos, whereas Nigeria has in New Delhi. While Nigeria is the largest economy in Africa, India, on the other hand, is rated among countries in Asia with largest economies in the world in 2023, and indeed one of the fastest growing economies in the world.
Now, the substance of Indo-Nigeria relations, of course, has grown in leaps and bounds over the years. Now, India is one of the largest trading partners of Nigeria, and Nigeria is also India's one of its own largest trading partners from the continent of Africa. Both bilateral ties, particularly with respect to trade, in the year 2021, or the period 2021 to 2022, was measured in billions of US dollars. Now, Indian-owned and operated companies are amongst the second largest employers in Nigeria.
There's absolutely no doubt about that, and you can see that when you go to areas like Lagos, for instance. We have more than 135 Indian companies operating currently in different parts of the country, of course, in different fields. And you can have them in the pharmaceuticals, in engineering, electrical machinery, equipment, plastics, chemicals, and so on and so forth. Now, already various institutions and programs have been established in both countries to promote achievements or progress in the sectors that we have mentioned.
Now, in September 2022, a joint venture arrangement between BioVaccine Nigeria Limited and Serum Institute of India was signed for the production of vaccines in Nigeria. Now, the Institute of India was expected to join BioVaccine of Nigeria in building their manufacturing plant at Ota in Ogun State.
And now, the ongoing G20 summit in New Delhi, India, where President Bola Tinubu has been invited, and some of his cabinet members are also attending with him. Indian investors have indicated interest in multi-billion-dollar investment in Nigeria. And the move has also continued to elicit commendations by, of course, investors and other stakeholders in various sectors of our economy who believe that the Nigerian economy is heading towards greater heights. Now, the Nigeria-India relation, we want to ask. There's so many questions, so many things we need to know. But most importantly, how has this been mutually beneficial over the years for both countries? And what are the underlying principles and core values of diplomatic relations between the two countries? And when we talk about economic interests, we will also be seeking answers to questions, of course, like trade balance, investments in the sectors that we have mentioned before now. And these are some of the issues we'll be looking at, and President Bola Tinubu is really pushing ahead for more investments from members of the G20, especially India. So that's our topic on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. It's Friday's edition. Always interesting to have you with us on this show, and it's reaching you live from the network service of the NTA. I am Claire Adelabu Abdurasak. Thank you for joining us.
I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague to also welcome you to the program. And we are live from our headquarters studios in Abuja, the nation's capital. We'll be joining our colleagues shortly for the highlights of the morning news, and thereafter I will take business news and newspaper review. For now, here is Frama Paye, who has the highlights of the news this morning. Morning, Frama.
Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Nigerians. Here is the morning news. We begin with the G20 summit in India. President Bola Tinubu is reassuring Nigerians in the diaspora that his administration will continue to work hard to deliver a Nigeria they will be proud to return to. But he also urges them not to overstay their welcome abroad. It was during an interactive session with a cross-section of Nigerians present in India.
We are going to be net exporters of food, dairy, and others. We should be. We have the resources. We have steel deposit and the Quran that can satisfy our need and leave excess for export.
Meanwhile, the multi-billion-dollar investment interest indicated by Indian investors in Nigeria has continued to elicit commendations by stakeholders in various sectors who believe Nigerian economy is heading towards greater heights.
This government, the president, but also the Minister of Finance, is extremely committed to ensuring that we digitalize government services in Nigeria.
We have opportunity with infrastructural deficit of about 3 trillion to bridge between now and the next 50 years. And that creates a huge opportunity for investors like yourselves to come in, to tap into that opportunity.
And Nigerian professionals in the solid minerals sector will soon travel to Australia for more studies, thanks to a deal brokered by the Minister of Solid Minerals, Mr. Alake, in Perth, Australia. Presenting the request to the Minister for Mines and Petroleum of the Government of Western Australia, Alake acknowledged the progress made by the government in mineral development. He proposed a program enabling Nigerian mining professionals to study modern mining technology and practices in Western Australia with government support.
Into this seemingly new area for us, then we need all the capacity building, training, knowledge, and regulations.
Africa's first climate summit in Kenya has ended with the 2023 Nairobi Declaration, which intends to propel the African agenda and set an action-oriented framework that will develop the renewable energy sector and increased funding for African countries. A $23 billion commitment has been made for green growth and mitigation efforts across Africa.
The African Union will work out a roadmap for this declaration.
Green energy potential is going to define the future of global opportunity for unprecedented prosperity and a new paradigm of industrialization.
Stakeholders have continued to express confidence that the new Ministry of Information and National Orientation has been assigned the right minister. Mohammed Idris Malagi, who appropriately drive government's policy for effective and accurate information dissemination. Former governor of Niger State and a member of the 10th Senate, Abubakar Sani Bello, who visited the minister, reaffirmed the commitment of the National Assembly to the cause of ensuring good governance in Nigeria.
Well, this ministry is a very important ministry because, like you said, the agenda has been set, and it's now left for the ministry to explain to Nigerians what the agenda is all about, what government programs and policies are all about, and going forward, this ministry will help in communicating to the general public.
The House of Representatives has vowed to expose perpetrators of crude oil theft in the country and ensure they are brought to justice. At the inauguration of an ad hoc committee to investigate the matter, security agencies advocate maritime security reforms to curb oil bunkering in Nigeria.
Nigeria has continually failed to meet its daily production quota as set by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC.
I resolved to constitute an ad hoc committee to investigate crude oil theft in Nigeria with a view to curbing economic loss and ensuring that everyone complicit in the theft is brought to book.
And that's the morning news. The program continues with Claire and Kingsley after this break.
You're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And the federal government has introduced new policies to stimulate the economy. And a conglomerate of capital market experts is now enjoining economic managers to take a look into the sector through a public-private partnership approach to complement the quest for economic growth. Our correspondent, Alika Okbanachi Arua, has details of that and more.
The assemblage of these stockbrokers is to set the record straight, which is highlighting the importance and strength of the capital markets. They emphasized that they are not oblivious of the economic reforms and efforts to stabilize the market, but also set some targets. They are pretty clear in their submissions that government should embrace a public-private partnership approach that will promote economic growth, bridge infrastructural gap in the country, and attract foreign investors into the country.
A lot needs to be done in terms of access to capital, ease of doing business. Capital will only flow to where it is going to be received in a way that is encouraging, in a way where things can be done with ease, in a way where they can predict somehow what they are going to experience.
After extensive consultations and deliberations, the gathering recommended that a country like Nigeria needs a sustained double-digit economic growth in Nigeria to maintain the pace with global outlook.
The stock market has been relatively bullish, doing well, and that's, in my view, on the back of the expectation that there is hope for the economy. If investors are not seeing hope in the economy, they won't be investing.
Let's take a look at Thursday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Okbanachi Arua.
All right, thank you very much, Alika Okbanachi Arua, for the business package. And it's time to take a look at the newspaper and on newspaper review with Chukwuduka Dugbaja.
Chukwudi, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Very well.
Hello, Claire.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. It's Friday.
Yes, it's Friday.
We're going to have time to relax a bit.
For you, Ba?
Claire.
All right, so let's get ahead straight away with the headlines from the leadership newspaper on Friday. Below the nameplate, which is the lead story, still on the fallout from the judgment of the presidential election petition court. Will fight on, Atiku and Obi say, after tribunal verdict. Head to Supreme Court in search of justice. I lost the battle, won't lose the war ahead, ex-vice president declares. Struggle for justice continues, says LP candidate. And lawyers differ on judgment. Illegal mining, 30 killed in Abuja landslide. And Gabon junta leaders release Bongo from house arrest. And doctor arrested for harvesting woman's organ in Plateau. 14 officers, 9 soldiers face army court-martial in Abuja. Akeredolu, that's the governor of Ondo State, returns from Germany. He'd been away on medical leave, and congratulations to him, and we wish him full recuperation. Akeredolu returns from Germany. Details on page 18. Claire.
All right, I think all the stories you read, Kingsley, are also on the headline of the Daily Sun. The Daily Sun leads with Atiku will be opened up on tribunal's verdict, and a number of riders there to go with that story. But just above the nameplates there, above the headline, I beg your pardon, Nigeria lost 16.25 trillion naira to crude oil theft in 11 years. That's according to members of the House of Rep. And other stories, courts, army to court-martial 15 officers and 9 soldiers. It's also on the front page. Choose peace or get killed. DHQ warns terrorists. And 19 kidnapped in Abuja, 30 killed in illegal mining landslide. We'll hold emergency security meeting to address issues. That's Wiki. That's it for the Daily Sun this morning. Chibodi.
Okay. I like that bit. Choose peace or get killed. And we follow that up with 814 terrorists killed, 4,560 others surrendered in 3 months. Kudos to our military. We must say at this point, without security, no one is sure of anything. And part of the reason we have skyrocketing food prices, we keep on mentioning it, is that our farmers don't feel safe enough anymore, particularly those in the north, to go out there and till the soil. Some have indeed gotten harm's way, if we all remember the kind of news we've been getting, from these terrorists, insurgents or bandits, whatever name they go by. So more weapons to the men and women in uniform, more communication gadgets, but more importantly maybe, the communication or cooperation between civil society and the men and women in the theater of war or campaign against insurgency should never ever be taken for granted for once. If the military tell you, it's just that for security reasons they don't out with everything. You'll find out that the successes being recorded now are happening because civil society is teaming up with them. More cheering news now. Let's get into manufacturing. Manufacturers pay 607 billion naira tax in 6 months. This is coming from the National Bureau of Statistics. They say there is a 115% increase compared to previous performance in the corresponding period. So what happened? What are the tax collectors doing now that they have not been doing before? Whatever it is, let them keep up the effort. Actually, revamping the economy, if you ask me, it should be a multi-pronged effort. Cut down on waste, increase the IGR. This is part of what has just been mentioned. Give the people more room for productivity by making the environment more friendly to productive ventures. There are challenges within the economy, but these we can surmount if we are well focused and really serious about pulling ourselves out of an economic doldrum. Lastly, from my side here, Atiku will be head for Supreme Court to appeal judgment. I have long confessed that I am of the school of journalism that treats the glass as half full of water rather than half empty. So let Atiku and Obi go to the Supreme Court if that is how their frame of mind is. What should continue to matter ultimately is how these cases of litigation eventually end up shoring up democracy in Nigeria more and more. When I see people who pray against problems, I laugh to myself quietly, because whether they like it or not, problems will continue to come into life. What matters is your capacity to accept challenges. You know, why you pray to whoever you pray to or whatever you pray to. Nigeria's democracy, to me, is the ultimate beneficiary from all this. We get better. So good luck to whatever anyone wants to pursue, as long as we gain from it.
Well, thank you. There is a story on page 14 of the Leadership newspaper. It's not on the front page. And then there is another story also inside the paper, which I come to that shortly. Now, the headline of the story, it's been online, and I've read the story for the past 24 hours or so. It says, 10 arrested over murder of varsity student in Ekiti. Now, this story is coming from the Federal University, Oye Ekiti, in Ekiti State, one of the universities established by former President Goodluck Jonathan. Now, a student who's 200 level of the Department of Nursing, identified as Modupe Deborah Atonda, was declared missing on the campus, and only for her dead body to be discovered in a shallow grave later in the day, also within the university campus. There are various accounts. The school has been closed now because tension is high, and 10 persons are said to have been arrested. She was 18 years old, according to one account, and that she had stayed back to read in the night, and then when she didn't get back to the hostel, her colleagues raised an alarm that, look, we haven't seen our mate, where could she possibly be? And the search party was deployed. One of the telltale signs was that they saw one of a pair of shoes, one, and then I think an earring or so, and then behind the faculty, that's a building also on the campus, they saw a freshly dug shallow grave, and upon further digging, they discover, her body was inside. Now, for any parent, this is the most distressing story that you can hear, and you would, of course, not like to be fed with this kind of ugly and very terrible news. When you send your children to school, there is some dispatch to say, look, my child is going to a secure environment, not only to learn, but that my child will be safe while on the school premises, and when the child comes back, of course, that becomes yours. So the school, of course, has responsibility for your child while the child is within the premises of that institution. And you can see how the government on its own has been worried sick about the spate of kidnapping and abduction from a number of institutions, which of course appears to have also gone down considerably. But for a child or a student, 18 years old, to have been snatched from within the school premises, murdered, and one account says that her eyes were gouged out. So apparently for ritual purposes. So where was the security department of the Federal University at Oye Ekiti? That one, the student was abducted, and then two, a shallow grave was being dug, and there was no indication from anywhere. I mean, it takes a while to dig a grave. Let's be realistic. It takes a while. It wasn't a deep six, but it takes a while to dig a grave and then to put it there. You might say, oh yeah, we discovered it fairly early, but this was also within the precincts. It wasn't like it was said 10 kilometers away from the institution, or several kilometers away from the institution, behind one of the buildings on the school premises. How could the authorities of an institution be so negligent, if you may, on the face of it, with regard to the safety and security of persons, whether or students or workers or even visitors to that institution? I think this is a very worrisome thing, and we have to get into it.
Kingsley, yes. Worrisome is an understatement. The dastardly nature of what has happened would continue to shock us, petrify us. It's simply not acceptable. Yes, in our days, we will peep out from our hostels when the Buccaneers, the Pirates Confraternity, they were bearing coffins that did not contain anything, you know, candles lit and all that. Then those of us from the hinterland will peep out and say, what are these people up to? Who are they? Things got worse. Things got worse, and it's as if we have lost all feeling of passion for fellow humanity. That is not good for any of us. How can I, as a parent, be at home, then the next thing you tell me is that my son or my daughter has been murdered in cold blood? You just added now that the eyes have been gouged out. So this is deliberate. This is murder premeditated. Well, as usual, we have a job to ferret out whoever did this. Look at, even in Abuja here, there's the story of a DSS officer shooting a fashion designer.
That's the second story I was going to come to. Please go ahead.
Yeah. They say that officers of the Federal Capital Territory Police Command on Thursday night quelled a violent protest. Do you know what they allege? Please, as journalists, we must always allege till we prove everything. They say that the DSS officer was brought by a dealer whose customers failed to pay, you know, for services rendered in good time. So you can see the flimsy excuse people are now talking about. At the end of the day, you ask yourself, do we bring in thinking into the things we do? Or are we now being driven by raw emotions? Something is wrong within the polity.
Okay, so while we're still talking about those violent issues, the 30 killed in illegal mining landslide in Abuja, the way it's been reported, one would get the impression that it's something that just happened or happened, you know, at an instance. But I don't know. I've been reading through to find out, you know. But apparently this is a cumulative, you know, number over time. And it's quite unfortunate. The local government chairman of Buhari met with the FCT minister, you know, of course, being a former colleague, you know, Minister Wike was council chairman, and so
yes.
The Buhari chairman went to appeal, you know, to him for help. And of course, Wike had promised to meet with the Minister of Solid Minerals, you know, steel, both of them, to discuss that matter. And I think the case of illegal mining in parts of the country is becoming, again, a major concern. And people don't seem to realize the danger, especially when it's within area of where people live. You know, and this is what has caused, you know, the deaths in Kuje. And Kuje is just, you know, on the outskirts of the FCT.
We shouldn't be inhuman, but you see, when death comes from something that looks like suicide, you begin to say, hey, why would they do this to themselves? So we must keep on advising people not to become desperados because the economy is somehow. It's not an excuse enough.
It's not.
Killing oneself is a sin against God. You understand? But the positive thing is, please let them go and exploit whether those minerals are in commercial quantities so that our revenue base will be shored up.
Obviously.
Yes, please.
Obviously. I don't know if Kingsley has anything. I
want to come back to the story of the incident that was reported to have occurred at Garki International Market here in Abuja, involving the DSS officer. There are a number of underlying issues. One, Nigerians are fond of inviting armed personnel, service personnel, into civil disputes. There was no criminal nature of whatever went on, whether it was a customer to a fashion designer who didn't deliver the clothes or items on time, or whether it was a question of indebtedness of a fashion designer to a supplier. It didn't warrant the invitation of an armed personnel of the DSS. The personnel went to the market with a gun. And it was in the course of the altercation between the customer and the client, and the fashion designer or whoever it was in the market, that the DSS officer was said, to have fired a gun. Now, increasingly, we have seen police personnel are not reportedly getting involved in such matters in the past, because they were always the first point of call. You have a dispute with somebody, say, I will go and bring mobile, I will go and bring XYZ, and these are civil issues. I'm not saying that if you are a debtor, pay your debt. And if you have any civil dispute with any person, find ways of resolving those matters civilly. But to say you go and bring an army personnel, you go and bring a DSS personnel, this is what has happened now.
That's it.
And there should be consequences. There should be consequences
of course,
where you officially deployed for this engagement and so on and so forth. And why one person is said to have died from this incident, is reported to have died. So how do you account for that?
Anyway, so just before we wrap up, I just want to read out this cartoon. It's on the second page of the Daily Sun. It may be distasteful to our learned colleagues, but it sends a whole lot of message, out there. It says, that's the woman now talking to her husband, who apparently is a lawyer. Said, dear, why not tell that politician client that his case is bad and advise him to discontinue with it? And the son, he has a box with SAN written on it, says, and you want a new car as a birthday gift, eh? All right.
Yeah, don't drag me into our
No,
colleague. There's a learned colleague around here.
I said even
Colonel Kotimo called Femi Falana his learned colleague.
No. Kingsley does not have a chance to speak on this matter. He doesn't have a chance to speak on this matter. Please, producer, let's go for a break.
You already said it is distasteful and ignorant, so I have nothing to say about it.
Just leave us alone.
Yes.
Could you have a pleasant weekend?
You too, guys. Thank you so much.
All right, welcome back, and you're watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. To kickstart a conversation on Nigeria-India relations, what benefits? Let's take a background report by our correspondent Abdul Salam Jubril.
2 years before Nigeria's independence in 1958, India formally established relations with Nigeria. Soon after independence, the Indian government got involved in helping establish several military projects in Nigeria that includes building military establishments like the Nigerian Defense Academy (NDA) at Kaduna and the Naval College at Port Harcourt, along with other military training facilities. Recently, India's Minister of State for External Affairs noted that Nigeria is India's largest trading partner in Africa, stressing that bilateral trade between both countries had risen to $14.95 billion in the year 2021 and 2022. Available data also shows that the government of India, through the Exim Bank, is financing solar power plants in Kaduna State and a gas-based power plant in Cross River State, summing up to about $60 million. At the Nigerian-Indian Presidential Roundtable and Conference held on Wednesday, 6 September 2023 in New Delhi, both countries stressed that Nigerian businesses can tap into India's vast population, while Indian companies can access Nigeria's sizable market, which will lead to increased sales and revenue for businesses in both countries. At the conference also, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu met with Indian business representatives towards mobilizing international funding for infrastructure development. The president was able to get the commitment of 2 Indian companies to invest $14 billion in Nigeria. India's Jindal Steel and Power has agreed to invest $3 billion in Nigeria's steel industry, and Indorama Corporation will invest an extra $8 billion to expand its petrochemical facilities in Nigeria. While both countries have large populations, Nigeria having the largest economy in Africa and India among the top 10 economies in the world, some experts advocate ensuring deeper economic ties, trade partnerships, and increased investments that will benefit both nations. They also harp on the need to strengthen ties and unlock new economic opportunities to facilitate growth and prosperity in both countries. These will form the crux of discussions as guests speak to the benefits of Nigerian-Indian relations shortly.
Thank you very much, Abdulsalam Jibril, for that backgrounder. Now, we're going to have a number of guests to be with us for today's conversation. At some point, we'll be going over to our State House correspondent, Musbah Adan Wahab, who is in New Delhi, accompanying President Muhammadu Buhari to the G20 summit. But of course, he will be giving us some insights into some of the sideline meetings that the president has had with Indian business leaders and others for purposes of today's interaction. But right here in the studios, we'd like to welcome a regular guest on Good Morning Nigeria, is Associate Professor Sharif Ghali Ibrahim of the Department of Political Science and International Relations at the University of Abuja. Associate Prof. Sharif Ghali Ibrahim, good to have you this morning.
Thank you for having me, Kings.
Okay. All right, so let's begin the conversation this way. Indo-Nigeria relations have been on for well over formal relations have been on for well over 6 decades and counted. Of course, we'll be looking at many dimensions to these relations. From your point of view, are these warm or lukewarm?
Well, the Nigeria-India bilateral relation is something that has been very cordial and progressive. Looking at the initial stage of developing this particular relationship since even before Nigeria got independence, when India established its mission office in Nigeria in 1958. Then after that, we've also recorded other political engagement, diplomatic engagement between Nigeria and India. In 1962, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru visited Nigeria. And in that particular visit, so many engagement as well as diplomatic ties were actually cemented. Apart from this, in also 2007, we also recall that Prime Minister Singh also visited Nigeria, which was incremental, so to say, in terms of diplomatic engagement from the hitherto initial coming of Nehru to Nigeria. Then in 2016 also, the Vice President of India came to Nigeria. So also in 2015, President Muhammadu Buhari went. The economic relationship has been also good. Looking at the, India's import and export, looking at the, 3 billion US dollars of actually selling to Nigeria, as well as importing about $10.88 billion of worth of imports to India. So this has continued to grow. And looking at the other areas, for example, every year we have 40,000 Nigerians visit India, and 50% of those who visit India, they are on actually medical tourism, while 50 other percent that constitute education, training, business, among others. So you can see how the relationship has continued to actually grow. And Nigeria is also the 5th source of international students, in India. And as we speak, we have over 30,000 Nigerians who study in India. So this is under, the bilateral relationship between India and Nigeria. Looking at the other side, which is the G20, for example, which is to start today in India, And President Ahmed Bola Tinubu is the first head of state to have arrived in India, you know, looking forward to the commencement of this particular summit. Nigeria is actually part of the African Union that has been invited, because this is the first time that Africa is actually getting more coupled with the G20, especially with the campaigns made by Modi of India to make the G20 more open and inclusive, make sure that the African Union also has a position, has a voice within that particular forum, just like the the European Union, which is also a member of the G20, apart from G5, G8, 6 other members, as well as European Union, like Brazil, India, China, South Africa. All members of the BRICS are actually members of the G20, excluding Russia. Now you take Russia out of the G5, you now bring in Mexico. They're looking at the G8, for example. You look at, for example, Italy, Japan, Germany, France, United Kingdom, United States of America, and Canada, plus Russia, because officially it was the G8, but it was later cut to 7 due to the invasion of Crimea by Russia. So formed in 1999, the G20 has been trying to actually strengthen the global economy, looking at food security, climate change, migration, and other salient issues that affect the global economy per se. So Africa will now have formal status, in the G20 by next year, which is 2024, when Brazil get to host the next forum.
Thank you, Associate Prof. Sheriff Ibrahim, for your opening comments there. Let's quickly introduce Ogbonna Ukuku. He's an investment promotion expert, and he's joining us via Zoom from the United States of America. Ogbonna Ukuku, if it's online.
Yes, all right. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to join, national discourse like this.
All right. Our correspondent, our State House correspondent, Musa Adan Wahab, will be also joining us all the way from New Delhi, India. Musba, of course, has been filling us in with details of the president's visit and giving us, accurate and timely account of what is going on just before the commencement of the G20 summit. Musba, it's good to see you. If you can hear me, let me just start by asking you if you consider the bilateral relations between Nigeria and India, India should be home to you. How homely are you feeling, first of all?
Well, Claire, thank you very much. I'm happy to join you this morning. Well, I'm feeling at home that Nigeria and India appear to be long-standing friends who have been having this bilateral relations for years now, like the guest in the studio mentioned, and rightly so. They have commonalities, they have common features in terms of culture, and the huge population across the two countries, India here and Nigeria as the biggest black nation in the world and in Africa. That's made Nigeria a very strategic partner to India for years. And of course, Indians, the investors here, have been seeing Nigeria as a big market for them. And of course, the president also reiterated that when he spoke to the Indian investors here, that this is the best market for them anywhere in the world where they can get the best return on their investments, leveraging on the population that Nigeria has, particularly the youthful age that the country has, which continually demands goods and services, which investors, not only Indians, can plug into, leverage on, and get best of their investments.
You know, Musba, okay, sorry. Musba, bilateral relations is usually driven by interest, you know, between both countries. And good enough, you mentioned culture. What have you seen?
Can you come again, Claire, please?
I said bilateral relations is usually driven by interest, you know, between, you know, countries. You talked about culture, you know, when you were speaking just now. What have you seen? Have you seen any very significant similarity, very significant cultural assimilation?
Well, in terms of culture, not so much not much of them is in line with our own. But of course, when you talk of interest, they have interest in Nigeria. That has been for years. Remember, in the education sector, Indian teachers used to be some of the leading teachers in Nigeria years back. And now they have been showing interest in investments in Nigeria. And the interest have been there, but what was lacking apparently was the courage to bring in their money. They're ready to invest more in Nigeria, but according to what they said, what they told us during the business conference that took place here 2 days ago, they were having this doubts of security on their investment, sanctity of contract and all of that. But the president has taken some steps, which they are now saying has very good and encouraging to them, particularly the removal of subsidy and again, the harmonization of exchange rates. Now, the president came with that intention to remove the discrimination between black markets and all the banking sector. The exchange rates we're having in Nigeria, multiple exchange rates, and he has been able to address that to a large extent. So they are really commending that, and they say that will guarantee them that they can always repatriate whatever they make in terms of profits from their investment in Nigeria back to their country, and now they are ready to do more, bring more investments. Like you may know, in 2022, the trade volume between Nigeria and India was about $15 billion US. Now, with this business conference that just held 2 days ago, they are now ready to bring more investments, another tune of $15 billion US. In steel, particularly, an investor showed interest to invest 3 billion naira, and Indorama, which has been having issues in the oil and gas sector, the president has been able to resolve whatever issue they were having with NNPC. And of course, it was mentioned here, and they are now ready to invest more, about $7 billion US in the oil and gas sector, particularly the gas sector. You know what that means for the country. So they are having this interest. And now that they are having this encouragement from the Nigerian government, they say, hey, why not bring more investment? The president told them that you are free to bring anything on the table. If it's something that will benefit the two countries, Nigeria and India, I'm ready to resolve it. But I don't have any free lunch to give you. But once it's about conducive environment for your business, we are ready to ensure that for you.
Well, Musba, thank you very much for the insights that you have provided. But let's deep dive further into the interactions that the president has had with the business community in India. One of the first meetings, of course, he had was one of the leading business persons in that country. Aside from the reassurances that the president has given and the enthusiasm that they have shown, in which other sectors are they pretty keen? It isn't as if this is the first time that Indians are being wooed, or the first time that they are seeking to have a stake in the Nigerian economy by way of investment. We had, of course, they tried to get into our steel in the past. They also were brought in decades ago to help manage our railways. We do know that they've been in textiles. So what are the new areas of attraction to them, or re-entry, if you may, into the Nigerian economy?
Right. Very well, Kingsley. Apart from steel and oil and gas sector that I mentioned earlier, they're also looking at other sectors like agriculture, information technology. You know, Kingsley, of course, that India is one of the leading giants in information technology. And the Minister of Communications, Innovation and creative economy is also here with his team, with investors on the sidelines to see how they can learn from what India has been able to do in information technology and bring that on board. The Director General of NIDA is also here with his minister, and they have been meeting investors, not only to woo investors, but also to learn from them how they have been able to do what they have done and how Nigeria can replicate that in the country. Apart from that, agriculture is also there. We have Nigerian investors here too, who are meeting their partners in India to see how they can resuscitate agricultural value chain in Nigeria to develop that sector. Of course, that's one of the sectors that the president has shown interest to develop very quickly. And of course, we also have a power sector. And we have Nigerian investors, particularly Sun Africa from Nigeria, talking to their partners there. And the gray areas that they have been having, they brought it to the president in a meeting, and he has been able to address that. He's still working on it, and they are investing in solar energy in Nigeria. You know, we have abundance of that in Africa and particularly Nigeria. So that's a Nigerian investor is now bringing his partners to make sure that they fast track this project in rural communities of Nigeria to shore up the power generation that we have a deficit in. And of course, we have a deficit in infrastructure development, and the Infracom boss is also in India. They have signed bilateral memorandum of understanding on areas where they have where they're going to have partnership, and Nigeria is saying it's ready to spend about 3 billion dollars in the next 30 years, and so they are calling Indian investors to come and participate in this drive that Nigeria is ready to champion in the next 30 years. So there are other areas, including oil and gas, that I've also mentioned, that they are showing interest in, and we hope to see what benefits all of those will bring into the country in the next few years.
Okay, Musbah, thank you. It's glad to know that India is, of course, enthusiastic about, stepping up its investments in Nigeria under the bilateral relations that we have. And we know that India is one of the largest importers of petroleum products in the country. But I'm interested, like you said earlier, in the education sector. And I don't know about you, but I remember during my secondary school days, half of my teachers were Indians. And, is India also looking at that sector? Hello, Musbah.
You're clearly clear.
Let me rephrase. I said it's good enough that India is showing such enthusiasm in stepping up its investment with Nigeria, and we know that India is one of those, one of the largest importers of our petroleum products. But I'm interested in the education sector. Like you mentioned earlier, I don't know about you. During my secondary school days, half of my school teachers were Indians, and I dare say that it was an experience, having them teach us in subjects like biology, mathematics, and all that. Are we likely to see any scaling up of interest in this sector?
Well, Claire, first, let me say I do not belong to your age. You and Kingsley, you know what I mean. But in a more serious mode, the country has said that, Nigeria now, through the president, has said is seeing how it's going to develop the education sector. And of course, he told Nigerians in diaspora yesterday that this is the best tool to fight poverty in the country. And the president is ready to see how it will work on that sector, but this should not be on the scale that we have to bring in investors to come and do. This is something that the country on its own can address. Yes, the Indian teachers were there in those years, but now Nigeria, I think, has gone past that stage. Of course, we're still having Nigerians who are going across the world to get the best of education, and that is just because of the situation we're having in the country, because of some doubts that people have about education and about the reality as well. But the president has said it, that he is ready, as someone who has got the best of education from USA. He said it yesterday that there was no any semester he missed the dean's list when he was schooling, that he was one of the best students in his school in those days. And is ready now, being that he knows the value of education, is ready to do that back in Nigeria to make sure that the education sector develops. And of course, most Nigerians may not have to go out of the country necessarily because of education.
Well, Musbah Don Wahab, thank you very much. We just want to maximize the time we have with you because we understand you have another engagement. It's a very busy schedule that you have with the president. But tell us something, back again to the issue of investment and business. The information we have received so far would appear to be one-way track. Indians are interested in investing in Nigeria. They have received assurances from the president with regard to safety and security, as well as business opportunities. Now, on the other way, what are the issues that Nigerian businesses or businessmen raised? Because sometimes you can have issues with acceptance of your exports, let's say as Nigeria. There could be other barriers, whether subtle or otherwise, where this mentioned. That's one. And very quickly, take this along. The president had an interaction with Nigerians in diaspora, who of course are in India. What could you glean from the interactions that the president had with them? Are they happy and cool in India, or are there issues that they would like resolved between both countries?
All right, let me begin with the first one, Kingsley. This would not, to me, appear like a one-sided investment. Is going to be a win-win situation for both countries. And of course, the president did not only invite the investors in India to come to Nigeria. The table was a round one. They called it a round table, presidential round table and business conference. With Indian investors on one side, and of course we had Nigerian investors on the other side. And the intention was to see what are the challenges, what are the issues between these two parties, how can we bridge the gap. Nigerian investors are also here in their number to have their partners, like I mentioned earlier, in power sector, in oil and gas. The Indian companies are not coming in alone to do this investment. They are coming with their Nigerian investors who will partner with them to do this business. So it's not a situation of Indians alone benefiting from this. I mentioned the case of Sun Africa. Is one of the leading companies in Nigeria. And of course, we have the great Nigerian entrepreneur here, Tony Elumelu, is a big investor in the power sector as well. You know what the Transcorp company has been doing in the power transmitting sector. So we have Nigerian investors who are also here to collaborate with their partners in India to ensure that the investments will come in a big way, and a way that will benefit Nigeria, that will yield results in very quick terms. And going to the second question that you asked about the interaction between the president and the Nigerians here, it was it was a very fantastic experience for Nigerians here. They saw that opportunity of sitting with the president on one roof. Probably they've not seen it for years, and they came in their numbers to welcome the president. They did an honor to him, and of course the president listened to them. They are concerned about the situation back home. They ask questions about why is Nigeria where it is for now? Why is it that Nigeria cannot bring back its refineries? Why is it that we're not having steady power supplies and all of that? They asked various questions, and they were not limited in any way. And the president, in his characteristic manner, also came out to welcome them, and of course told them that all of those concerns they raised are his concerns too, and those motivated him to run for presidency, and he's here now, ready to do the job. He's not complaining in any way. He identified the challenges ranging from the dearth of purposeful leadership and to other strategic steps that the country is supposed to have taken, but now he said he's ready to bring the changes necessary to rewrite the story of Nigeria. And at the end of that session, the Nigerians here were so happy to hear from their president, and they said, and of course they also heard from the ministers as well. Some of those are very young, like Minister Bosun Tijani of Communication, and of course Doris Niti of Trade Investments, spoke to them. They were so happy to see that young people are gaining grounds in Nigeria, and of course some of them indicated interest to come back home. A lady, I remember her case, Esther Jack, came out to say, okay, with all of this you have said, I'm ready to come back home. I've finished schooling in India, and I have the best one of the best results in my area of study, and I'm ready to come back home. But how am I going to get employment because of what is happening in Nigeria? And luckily for her, she was able to approach the entrepreneur I mentioned earlier, Tony Elumelu, and Tony Elumelu gave her a very blank check to apply.
Oh dear, Musba, I hope we have not lost you, lost connection with you rather. I would have just liked to pop up a last question about what type of businesses, Nigerians in India are actually doing, because we know that fabric and spices, major product, that Indians are noted for. I was just wondering, I mean, all the Nigerians in India, what kind of businesses are they doing?
Is there, you might have to reconsider your stay. We have Nigerians here who are across the sectors. We have them in trade. We have our Igbo brothers who are doing their business here in a very good manner, buy produce or products from here and taken to Nigeria. We also have Nigerians who are studying here. We have those who are in the pharmaceutical industry here. Of course, they're one of the leading personnel they have in India too. They have been able to learn fast, and of course we also have in agricultural sector. But all of those people the president spoke to yesterday to consider the fact that there's nowhere like home, and they have to also make contributions by coming home to see what they can do to help their own country. And Nigerians in Diaspora Commission too, the chairperson Abike Dabire also spoke to them, and some of those people are now reconsidering coming back home. But the fear is, what are we going to do back home? And the president, of course, assured them that the process has started to rewrite the story of Nigeria, and is ready to ensure the country they will be proud of in years to come.
All right, Musba Odan Wahab, we would really like to appreciate you for being with us on this segment of Good Morning Nigeria. We'll leave you to pursue other engagements, of course, that you have. We know that you're about 4.5 hours ahead of us at this material time. Musba Odan Wahab, our State House correspondent with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, covering the G20 summit. Thank you very much for being with us from New Delhi. All right, now back to the studios here. Would like to, of course, welcome another guest. Is Ambassador Dr. Grant Ihiobuchi, of course, a career diplomat. He's just joined us. He had his posting in different parts of the world, including of being in the Republic of Congo with concurrent accreditation to COMISA. That's the equivalent of ECOWAS. And he was also in Tunisia. This was during the Arab Spring. Ambassador Grant Ihiobuchi, we're glad to have you this morning.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be with you.
Okay. Earlier, we introduced Ogbonna Okuku. Okuku, of course, is a regular on Good Morning Nigeria, and he's a trade and investment expert. Ogbonna, you heard our correspondent. This is, as it were, the latest information arising from the business roundtable that was held just about a day or two ago in New Delhi between Nigeria and India. But how do you situate business relations between both countries over the years?
One, first thing advocating for, where the president of the country becomes the chief promotion officer. For me, two, what admiration or what testimonies to the faith body, what I mean by churches, when people give testimonies, it actually attracts more people in the abilities of God and what God can do, is what agglomeration does to investment promotion. What am I trying to say? Now, companies like Indorama, being in that meeting, mentioning that they have been able to grow from just a $200 million investment in Nigeria to a $15 billion investment in Nigeria, shows that there is prospect in that nation. Companies like Jindal have also done businesses in Nigeria, and then with the assurances given to them by the nation, saying, I am the one leading this team. Anything you want, which is the hand-holding thing we've always prayed for that should happen. The hand-holding effort of a president of a nation saying, anything you have, the issues you have, let me help you sort it out to make sure that I understand your plight. Because one thing Wale said, from professional point of view, an investor does not have the time. You can imagine, because we need to understand that one thing Hofstede taught us in investment promotion, whether you like it or not, there must be a cross-cultural, dimension to promotion. What that simply means is that you need to understand the culture of a man who has money. If I have $1 billion now, my disposition is different from a person who earned maybe 200,000 naira as a director in a ministry. So the way you treat me should be different. You need to understand how to treat me. So if, for example, I have my file or have my proposal in a ministry for over 1 year, and then I, as a billionaire, you expect me to be running around, it's not possible. So the fact that the president himself has said, if you have any issues, I want to deal with it directly, gives that confidence that every investor wants to see or hear about. And then this also would send signals globally that first is that the president of Nigeria wants to assist. Yes, the enormous opportunities in Nigeria cannot be overemphasized. We've not even tapped into the solid mineral sector. The oil and gas, we've not even been able to add value to it to the fullest. So these are the things I have seen happen in that meeting. I'm so excited because, for my field to begin to make progress, I am excited about it because it opens up the economy. Because within the ecosystem, the industrialization, speaking to raw material supply strategy, our participation in global, when it comes to global value chain, is going to increase. And then the job would definitely be created. So some of these incentives, being able to have a single window where FX can be bought and sold, where you have one black market and then you have another kind of market, brings in a lot of discrepancies in the economy. So with this all, creating a level playing ground in the nation, it goes to show that we are serious for business. Not just because the president has said it, but because he has actually at the forefront of making sure that we are able to drive investors to Nigeria. So I'm very excited. And then with the level of people he traveled with, these are people who have shown that they have been able to achieve things, do businesses in this environment. So it goes to show that you can actually do business in Nigeria. So for me, as an investment promotion expert, this is the right move. So what's left now is, who are the people who will do the follow-up? Do we have the right people? Yes, he has said to the ministers, he gave the ministers instructions there and then, follow up with A, B, C, D. So, and give me feedback. So if we have those kind of follow-ups going ahead, so that means the advocacy, for investors, then local investors who are already doing business in Nigeria, there are people who are from other countries, they need to hear from them. Are you having issues? Let's solve your problem, because the president is willing to solve your problem.
Now, Kuku, thank you very much. Speaking to us, of course, from the United States of America. We'll return to you shortly. Let me bring into the conversation Ambassador Ihiobuche, who, of course, is an accomplished career diplomat, and, of course, Ambassador Extraordinary. Ambassador, I just want to look at, our history, Nigeria and India. I mean, right before independence, this relationship had been established, and both countries have been in the struggle together for independence. They've been in the struggle against apartheid. There are couples that you could best describe as those for better for worse couple, in good times or in bad times. India and Nigeria have been together. What can you say is the factor responsible for that? And secondly, how has Nigeria been able to harness the comparative advantage?
Thank you very much, ma'am. First and foremost, let me thank the NTA and this wonderful crew. I'm fairly familiar with you because I was the spokesman for the Foreign Ministry for quite a while. I was also the Director of Public Communications and Public Relations, Culture, Information, that's external publicity. So at the time, they were even wondering, is he now in the Ministry of Information or NTA? So it's good to be here with you. And India, like you said, but rather than compare them to a couple, an old couple for better for worse, I would say that India complements Nigeria very much as brother, more or less twin brothers. India, there is a lot of comparative advantages, similarities, and areas of common interest between India and Nigeria. In the first instance, even prior to independence, both of them belong to Commonwealth of Nations. And the Commonwealth of Nations is the family of all the Anglophone countries. And India has produced Commonwealth Secretary General, just as Nigeria has produced Commonwealth Secretary General. And in whichever way you take it, Nigeria stood on the shoulders of the Commonwealth Secretary General from India, who hailed from India, to accomplish so much and brought Nigeria to the height of his glory in the Commonwealth, which is something attributable to the antecedent historical background of India and Nigerian relations. Culturally, we are same in the sense that India is a multicultural country, multi-religious country, and Nigeria is a multicultural or multi-ethnic and a multi-religious country. Both of them operate secular states, even though they are highly religious nations. But they operate secular states in the sense that the religious sector operates autonomous and independent from the state. There is nothing you can call state religion, so that it doesn't conflict with the freedom of worship of the individual. There is area of common interest between India and Nigeria. That is developmental. The fact that both India and Nigeria had been leading nations in the third world. And at the time, we were almost at parity in terms of development, in terms of GDP, and particularly infrastructural, agricultural development. But after a while, surprisingly, India sprang up. It's like they had a mini industrial revolution, especially when they veered into the Silicon Valley and started developing the digital economy, which today India is almost second to none among the third world countries. In fact, the only country you can relatively compare India with now among the third world countries is Brazil, and to some extent South Africa. But then Nigeria has its own huge comparative advantage. Just as India has highly developed manpower, highly skilled manpower, particularly contemporarily in the ICT, information communication technology, and which is ruling the world. And that's where they've got so huge advantage over us. Nevertheless, it's not as if we are lacking. All over the world. Okay, let me still leave it at the level of the third world countries, because I don't want to go into the second world or first world. Like in US, Nigerians are in NASA as globally acclaimed experts in very rare areas. And they are making waves. Just as India is almost everywhere. Software, ICT chips, particularly manufacturing those chips and exporting them. But Nigeria has equally one advantage, that our highly skilled, developed manpower. Locally, we export now in the form of economic migration. As far as I'm concerned, that's what I call it, economic migration.
I just wondered, Ambassador Ehiobuche, thank you very much for the points that you have raised. Well, let's come back again maybe to the economics of our relationship. For a number of Nigerians, what they see, for instance, are the footprints of Indian companies and businesses in our country. Anyone who is familiar with Lagos would point readily to the dominance of India, say, for instance, in textile. If you Aswani bus stop, which is very popular, 5-star, which of course they're all in the same location there. You had the Indians who were involved in that. And of course, we've mentioned the Indorama, which is in petrochemicals. And in the past, they tried to come into our railways. I think it was the Babangida administration that tried to get them in. They also tried to get involved in steel. That's with that Jalkuta. It didn't quite gel. What do we know? We know, for instance, that anybody who needs our crude oil in the first instance will come for it. So crude oil will be an item on our list. Is it an issue, for instance, that we appear, because the Indians are interested in spices and some of our agricultural produce? We hear they come for our ginger, they come for other items, and in some cases now solid minerals. What are the issues in our enlarging, if not also increasing our footprints in the Indian business environment?
Thank you very much. I did listen carefully also to your conversation with Chief Wahab, and the fact he's laying so much emphasis on the Mr. President's very, very urgent invitation to the Indian business community to come and invest in Nigeria. But I was also happy that you interjected on what about the other side of investment, which is offshore. At the level we are now, my advocacy is for offshore investment. That just as India, China, Brazil, all these countries that were at the same level with us are now tumbling over themselves to come in and invest in Nigeria. Like somebody said, investors look for their profit maximization. Foreign investors, they are not there as charitable organizations to be dishing out. They are there to invest and make profit. And it's not just making profit, maximization of it, and then capture the market penetration, and dominate and control it. And that's what we must watch out for. That the story of Ajaokuta is not a savory one. It's very, very unfortunate story. Because Nigerian government successively had invested so much, enormously, into Ajaokuta. For Indian so-called investors to come in, purchase our national patrimony. Because iron and steel is the pillar of infrastructural development of any emerging economy. I'm not calling us developing. We should be emergent economy. Now, we came as close as 24th position. And when I was in Tokyo, I made sure that our then president, Obasanjo, Baba, was always invited to G20 countries. And he comes as president or emperor of Africa, representing the entire Africa and presenting his position, both for Africa and specifically for Nigeria.
All right, Ambassador, thank you.
So,
and yes.
No, what I'm trying to say, if you may allow me to come down, is that we should also try to emphasize the fact of offshore investment, but borrowing a leaf from India, like the ICT area, the Silicon Valley. We have our own potential Silicon Valley. We have it in Lagos. We have it even here in Abuja. And if we pump in, or if Nigeria government take great interest in improving that sector, we can also export and invest elsewhere and make huge profit and repatriate home. It's not only what we now call brain gain from the brain drain. Ma'am, when I was in Tokyo, I established the NIDO. That is the Nigerian Diaspora Organization in Tokyo and in Nagoya, two big cities of Tokyo that is highly industrial, and you have a lot of Nigerians there.
Yes, we have to take a break now.
Okay.
Yes, we have to take a break. When we come back, we will talk more on that. And indeed, I was going to bring in Associate Prof. Ibrahim Sherif now to look at, how we have actually harnessed, all the resources that we have talked about, because bilateral relation is always hinged on servicing the interests and objectives of a nation, not just verbally or yes. So if we have not harnessed that and translated that into development, tangible development, physical development, then it's one-sided. If one other country is benefiting more from you, and then I mean, so when we come back, we'll look at that, and I'll bring in Associate Prof. Ibrahim. But you're watching Good Morning Nigeria. Let's quickly take a short break. We'll be back. All right, welcome back to the program Good Morning Nigeria, and we're discussing Nigeria-India relations. Back to Associate Prof. Sheriff Ibrahim. You heard my question. How do we harness this relationship between Nigeria and India, to service our interests and objectives?
Well, it's first of all to try to deal with political and diplomatic treason. For example, being Nigerians, we have these foreign enterprises coming to our own entity. Those who are stakeholders in making sure that such foreign direct investment are well established, they actually sabotage, all efforts sometimes. Looking at the fourth quarter of 2022 and the first quarter of 2023, more than 5 billion USD repatriated from Nigeria, investment withdrawn, from Nigeria. Why? Because investment is actually attracted. That is why I appreciate the zeal, the passion of Mr. President in India, making sure that all investors, come to Nigeria and invest. But investment is actually made by attraction, not by desperation. And in 2015, President Buhari went to India, taking about 121 official delegates to India. And so many investment, opportunities were being discussed, for Indians to come to Nigeria and Nigerians to go to India. But what happened? The investment began to actually depreciate, collapse, go down. So the impetus, the criteria to that, because
you said why?
Lack of attraction. Apart from lack of attraction, the existential attraction that has been in place has also been sabotaged. Why? Because there is no entity, there is no investor that will actually pursue investment opportunity in a place that is not healthy. Healthy in the sense that the Indians have been subjected to perpetual abduction in Nigeria. So there is no way we have a kind of stable investment environment if we do not actually secure our own domestic environment as well as our borders. The investors have been here in Nigeria, of course. The French, the Americans, the Chinese, who are still here. But those who try to pursue a better investment opportunity, they're in Ethiopia, they're in South Africa, they're in Egypt, and many other places, Rwanda. But why? You have to attract investment. And this apart, one thing we must actually put into cognizance is that the trade between India and China has a good terms, because it's not actually a deficit trade on our own side, because 10.88 billion, export to India is not a minor, amount of money between 2018 and 2019, which India even, exporting about 3 billion worth of, goods or even services. So, but where does this investment come from, or this particular sales that Nigeria is able to actually acquire such colossal amount of money from India? Is oil and gas. Oil and gas. And now Nigeria is facing a great challenge. And what is that challenge? Because Russia, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, India is able to purchase oil from these particular countries at a lower rate. So that is why India used to be a major, buyer of Nigerian oil. But now it has a kind of a alternative where it buys the oil cheaper. The Ukrainian conflict has actually made oil cheaper to India, especially from Russia. So what we used to get from India will actually diminish. Why? Because our major enterprise, our major investment, our major goods we actually offer to India is oil and gas. And now India has a better market to buy this from. So that is why I really appreciate the ambassador's submission. We have a kind of the same economic status with India, belonging to the same economic forum, which is called the South-South, the developing nations. You know, we are even, we were members of non-aligned movement together, looking at the cooperation within the framework of the South-South. So, but India was able to actually make a shift and produce, you know, what it has today. So, it's not actually Indians coming to Nigeria to invest in petrochemicals, just like what President has actually pursued. $8 billion in petrochemical, you know, and fertilizer, $3 billion in, you know, iron and steel investment in Nigeria, 1.6 billion into power sector, about 20 power plants to be established in Nigeria. Now, you have our own investors went to India. What story are we hearing? What we're hearing is what the Indians will do to Nigeria and in Nigeria. We have the rich men, the richest men in Africa, those in oil and gas, those in businesses, those in, you know, production. What and how much are they investing in India? This is the story we need to hear. Then apart from this, the Indians have tried to actually thrive in what the ambassador called information technology. Information technology. Why are we not investing in that particular area? We end up buying tricycles from India, you know, pharmaceuticals from India. What are we doing? We offer India only spices. What are we going to generate from spices for that sake?
Very good questions that you have raised there, Sharif. Very good questions. And I would like Ogbonna Okuku to respond to those questions that you have asked, because I also asked questions around that phenomenon. Okuku, one, how do we increase our footprint in the Indian business environment? And then, this is a fairly tricky one. Some persons would argue that the proliferation of Indian investment in Nigeria is often as a result of the positive disposition of investment bankers in Nigeria to Indian businesses versus Nigerian investors. Are we likely to see a rethink of that? And then also redirect Indian investment, encourage them to get into value addition. Because value addition is big business, we must name that, because just getting spices in their raw form is unlikely to take us anywhere. Ogbonna.
Yes, okay. I want to actually, let's look at it. I mean, what are the process to industrialization or your participation into the value chain, as it were? Now, you must have a well-educated, trained society. Number two, you must have your industrial, ability to industrialize by having the machines, the machines that you need to turn raw materials into finished goods. Three, you must have, that large market that will be able to consume whatever that you're producing. And number four, which is very critical, your raw material strategy has to work. So which brings me to the point where if all our ability to trade, okay, that is where our bankers or investors will rather deal with those who have access to these goods. Because whether we like it or not, we produce any pharmaceutical, what is our situation when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry that taking advantage of? Every single API that is used for even as small as paracetamol is gotten from India. So if we are still expending money in bringing those things here, so all we do here is actually, we in Nigeria, what we do in Nigeria is to couple paracetamol in Nigeria. The same with candy, the same with, so until we're able to get our raw material supply strategy, efficiently done, Then you have the industries. Then we now have a well-tailored financial engineering structure able to support some of these industries. So there has to be a well-targeted, well-structured, industrial plan within the ecosystem to make sure people from outside don't come and take over the entire industry. Now, you see, it goes to show that our small and medium, medium-scale industries are not well situated to be able to compete favorably when they're dealing with their counterparts all over the world. And then the world has moved away from where one man produces from A to Z. You must be able to add value, then you now push out. I'll give you a very simple example. There's where they call the button city in India, in China rather. Now, every button used for all apparels in the world, they produce about 60% of it. Now, they're not interested in making the shirt itself, but they're only interested in the button. So that alone creates job in that place, gives them a voice in the value chain production, in the global value chain. So anybody that is producing garments in Bangladesh would wait for buttons that will come from that same city in China. So it goes to show that if we're able to get our acts right, now from agriculture to the production line, which would require efficient infrastructure. So that goes to show that we have to have a holistic plan on our ability to bring in that industrialization that is required. So be that as it may, there is a lot of work that we need to do. Now, for the meantime, if we're able to, because we're having issues with FX, so if we're able to convince people who will bring in FX into our nation, I mean, that's the way to go, because you are planning to exit from full dependence on, foreign exchange to purchase every single thing that you need, being self-sufficient. So it's a plan. So you move from A to B so the low-hanging fruit will be let's encourage people to come and invest in our nation. So for you to do that, you must have an efficient system. You must be able to handhold investors. You must be able to provide investor support services to make sure investors don't find it difficult to navigate within your system. You must be able to, remove all bureaucratic red tapes that inhibit investors from doing business in your country. Now, when you have that liquidity in your system, again, if you don't have people who have experience in, let's say, in different fields. Let me use a very simple, area. Do you know, from Sokoto or from Zamfara up to the last state in Nigeria, in the south, do you know we don't produce glucose syrup? And glucose syrup comes from where? Cassava. There's no simple industry. So if you want to set up a factory where they make glucose syrup, who would you employ? Because you don't have people that have expertise in it in Nigeria. So you now have to still bring in people from offshore who will come and man those equipment. So what that means is that until we begin to have people who have expertise and experience in a particular sector, it makes it easier for you to, woo investors to come into that sector and then train the people, and they will have understanding on how these things work. So it's just, there has to be a plan. We need to sit back and then have a plan, a structured plan, and then be deliberate. It's always very key for every nation to be deliberate, because the same investors are being wooed by other countries. And then again, back to what you asked earlier about why won't investors move, Nigerians move to other countries to have their footprints. Let me say something. I've noticed, most investors move out from their own enclave because of saturation and then opportunities. For them to take an investment decision is because that sector might have been saturated. So they are looking for other clients where they can go and compete favorably and then do similar business. So when you see people moving in to come and do steel, it's because the steel industry in India is so huge and robust. So most of these companies will say, okay, let's go out in Nigeria because we don't have a lot of people doing steel business in Nigeria. So that's how it works.
Thank you, Ogbonna. Thank you. Let's come back to the studio. Ambassador Ihiebuchi, I'm just wondering, India is probably the largest country in the world in terms of population. And second largest. And if you look at Nigeria as well, within the sub-region, we are equally big.
We are the largest.
The largest. But in terms of poverty ranking, India is doing much better than Nigeria. What can we learn, or what have we learned from the strategy, policy, and implementation from India?
Yes, ma'am. I will agree and disagree with your premises. First, ma'am, India is second largest, quite all right. Nigeria is largest in Africa. And we have the largest market with purchasing power. I will touch on the electricity, energy, which Nigeria was partnering with Congo, DR Congo, to produce, to develop the Nga Dam, from where we can derive the entire energy deficit of Nigeria. At the time I was there, our energy deficit was 45,000 megawatts. And from Nga Dam, within 5-8 years of developing that Nga Dam, we would have derived up to 55,000 megawatts, which is the current deficit in Nigeria. And the River Congo, the largest body of fresh water, is still there. It's even growing bigger and having more potential to produce more and more hydroelectricity. Its yield power now, if fully developed, will be about 200,000 megawatts. And it's there. And we are grappling with just 5,000 megawatts for the biggest energy market in Africa. And we are half of the time in darkness, in the midst of plenty. I don't want to touch our gas, liquefied natural gas, our gas that we can use to fire our turbines, and so on and so forth, which we have been doing a lot of the time. But let me just say, madam, until Nigeria is able to produce its final petroleum products and power the Nigerian economy and society, industrial development will be a dream, will remain a dream. And this thing can be accomplished. From my experience in Congo, which I got our government so much interested in, and the strategic partnership, the MOU final draft has been done. It was just pending the two presidents, who were very eager then to come sit down, sign the bilateral side, and concurrently sign the multilateral side, because there were some other partners to it. But what I'm trying to say is that all this producing, what do we call it, shea butter, raw, and some companies will come and say they are investing in Nigeria, maybe it's just to produce that raw shea butter or ginger or whatever, and then carry the raw material out there.
So value addition, Your Excellency,
the value chain is gone.
Okay.
And that value chain is where Nigeria must come in and harness to employ our teeming youth.
Beautiful.
Yeah, Ambassador Hibiche, we are virtually out of time. Time is delimited for the program, around 7 to 9 Mondays to Fridays. Well, thank you very much. It's an issue we'll return to subsequently, because Indians are here, and I imagine that Indians find Nigeria quite hospitable. Every year, usually near the end of the year, they also celebrate elaborately their Diwali festival. In Lagos, they also use fireworks, and I think I've had fireworks here around Abuja as well. So, on which note, we'd like to thank all our 4 guests who were with us this morning. Musba Dan Wahab, our correspondent, earlier we signed him off. He joined us from New Delhi, where he's covering the G20 summit. Here at the studios, Associate Professor Sharif Ghali Ibrahim of the Department of Political Science and International Relations, University of Abuja. Thank you very much for being our guest. Ambassador Grant Hiobuche, thank you very much for being also with us for today's conversation. Ogbonna Okoko, an investment promotion expert, joining us via Zoom from the U.S. Ogbonna, we wish you safe return, and thank you always for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria. So, that's it for our program today, and indeed for the week. Join us on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Look after yourselves and enjoy your weekend. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
I'm Claire Adilabo Abdul Razak, and always remember to do the right thing. Have a great weekend from all of us here in the studio. Bye-bye.